Welcome, champions, to the next overview and tier list ranking, featuring the newest champion. This is where we'll break down their mechanics and place them in my overall tier list for every champion in the game. So let's talk about Miria, the lawful evil elf wizard, in seat 12. She serves the group as a tank and support, but she's not exactly a traditional tank, and in a fun and interesting way, in my opinion. Let's take a look at this Dami Mommy's necromantic undead pet user's kit, shall we? To start it off, she uses the level 1 spell, Ray of Sickness, to debuff enemies with her primary attack, hitting the nearest enemy and reducing the damage they deal by 50% for 6 seconds, though this effect cannot stack. Her ultimate attack will summon 5 skeletons to roam the battlefield, dealing 15 attacks to enemies before vanishing. During this time, all enemies on the field are slowed by 50%. Her first formation ability, Mage of High Sorcery, increases the damage of all adjacent champions, which is further increased by another formation ability, Soul Cage. With this, every time an enemy is defeated, she captures its soul and gains a Soul Cage stack. Her maximum numbers of these stacks is 1 for every 20 areas completed in your current adventure. Rounded up, the damage of Mage of High Sorcery is increased multiplicatively for each stack. So it just keeps getting better and better the deeper you push, and this makes for a nice hardy buff with Mage of High Sorcery. For her tanking role, she gains Zombie Bodyguard, where as long as she is alive, she summons zombos that share her hit points and places them in front of champions in the front column. These Zimbabwe's will take 90% of the damage dealt to those champions, acting as literal meat shields for them, leaving them to only take the remaining 10% of that damage. Miria taking the full 90%. Also note, with Zombie Bodyguard, it is affected by Warduke's Inversion, meaning everyone except your front line will receive a zombie to defend them. Potentially useful for AoE damage, but also leaving your front line more vulnerable. But in that situation of Warduke, as long as Valentine is receiving it, she'll throw it right back on Warduke at least. And while on the topic of Duke, Miria is particularly good for him, not just because of this, but because she has 2 positional formation abilities and she's evil, which suits him perfectly. And on that topic, she is great for Crowned as well as a seat 12 pick. You might think in intensive situations, this means Miria is going to get owned, redirecting all that damage to herself, and she does. But that's why she has her next formation ability, Clone, where she keeps Palpatinian clones of herself in her inner sanctum, equal to her Soul Cage stacks. That will take her place once she dies. This will not consume Soul Cage stacks, they're on separate counters. Also, for each clone summoned in an area, she will increase the effect of Mage of High Sorcery by 25% multiplicatively to even further excel in pushing deep runs. And finally, with Life Transference, she will increase the health of all other champions by an amount equal to her max health for each Soul Cage stack she has, stacking additively. Her specializations come down to a choice of increasing the effect of Mage of High Sorcery, 2 of them synergizing with Season 3, between either unaffiliated champions, champions with an intelligence of 15 or higher, or lawful champions, all stacking multiplicatively. The choice is simply choosing whichever gives you the highest boost with your formation. Her equipment slots are fairly standard, having only 1 all-damage bonus in favor of having one of her slots increase her specialization choice, and 1 for 2 of her main formation abilities, Mage of High Sorcery and Soul Cage, leaving the final 2 with the less inspiring ultimate attack damage and ultimate attack cooldown. So let's talk about the event she's tied to, Festival of Fools. In addition to the newcomer Miria, there is also access to Tatiana and Alindra this year. All of them are pretty good champions, that also each have a unique niche. Miria with her unique tanking, Tatiana and her speed mechanic in spawning more enemies, and Alindra with her increasing the effect of her affiliation's mechanics. As always, unlock them all and do what you can to full epic each of them. But as far as a hard focus, that will really come down to what you are looking to fill out in your formation. But my personal recommendation is Miria herself. But as always, it's worth mentioning that it is Alindra's last year active before she is retired into the pit of only being available through time gates. So what about her achievement and adventure variants? Her achievement is incredibly simple, requiring you to have her die, then revive 5 times in a run, in the same zone. All this means is you need to push to at least to zone 82, and watch her die and revive 5 times. Dunzo. Her variants are pretty basic by these days' standards for new releases, forcing her to be placed in your formation, able to be moved but not removed for all 3 of them. The first variant makes it so only champions adjacent to her, i.e. those getting buffed by Mage of High Sorcery, can deal damage. If you're forced to use her, you'll be doing this anyway, so not even really an issue here. The second throws 1 to 2 skeleton archers at you with each wave spawned, making you have to deal with a constant barrage of ranged attacks if you don't take them down fast. You'll also need to take down Lord Soth in each boss area in order to progress. This encourages you to slot some healers and make use of Miria's zombie meat shields, but otherwise isn't much of an issue. Lastly, her third focuses on her specializations, only being able to use champions who are either lawful, unaffiliated, or having an intelligence of 15 or higher. This isn't as harsh of a restriction as it may sound, as that still leaves more than half of the roster, including multiple core champions and those from the current season available, and shouldn't be a problem for anyone. She is deceptively simple and incredibly useful. Her numbers get very high if you're making a deep run, and still very good for an average run. Being a tank that increases the survival rate of other tanks is so much more in depth than just being a tank herself, and far more useful, especially when she doesn't even have to be in the front line, and is in fact encouraged not to be. But hell, put her up in the front as a tank too, even though her design is to hang back and absorb damage from other tanks. Pair her with Krydle and Turiel in a 3-tank situation, so Krydle evades attacks, Turiel is redirecting them, and she just revives so you have a persistent front line. And just use Valentine to give your DPS either Krydle's from the shadows or Miria's Mage of High Sorcery, but normally you're not going to want her in the front line. All you really need to do is have her adjacent to your DPS and you're set. In any case, Miria is damn good. We've been on a roll with Season 3's changes, and now Miria for some well-performing champions. Let's see if that ball keeps rolling. She starts off good and just gets better as you push. Is useful for damage and survivability, and available for every Day 1 Trials of Mount Tiamat restriction, and all 4 patrons with a feat for Zariel. Overall solid champion, high A tier. Do me a favor and summon a zombie on that like, sub, and bell. Leave a comment on what you think about Miria, other than the fact that you want her as your mommy, and have fun grinding Season 3. Have a hell of a time out there, champions.